Good afternoon to everybody. Without Hashem and Rosh Chodesh Sameach, Ot Ma'at, we're going into Nisan. I wanted to dedicate this Dvar Torah to which is a yahrzeit of Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, and as you can see from the title, he was born in 1910. And he passed away in 1995. One of the great poskim. I used to call him, much to his, he was very upset when they used to call him that title. I used to refer to him as a posek hador, and in his humility, he always used to get very agitated when they used to call him by that name. Al kol panim, he was born in 1910, and in Yerushalayim, on Shabbat Kodesh. He came from a mishpacha where his father was a big posek and a mekubal. And Rav Shlomo Zalman always said that, one of the things that he used to say is that a person has to be very sensitive to the feelings and to the heart of children. So what is the story behind the statement? He used to say like this. He said, it was after during Pesach, and he went with his father. He went to the Kotel to daven on Pesach at the Kotel, and on the way there or on the way back, it's not clear from this. Put that detail in. They met Rav Sonnenfeld, who was the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. So the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim, Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld, he asked him, tell me, young boy, he said to me, Yiddish, tell me, did you ask the Arba Shailot of Manishtana last night? I said, yeah. So he said, and tell me, and the year before, did you also ask? So he said, yes. So Rav Sonnenfeld was, was sort of joking with him. So he said to him, so if you asked 2 years ago the Manishtana and they gave you an answer, so how come that now the next year you're again asking the same question, but they're giving you the same answer? You don't remember the answer that they said the year before. So Rav Shlomo Zalman was a young kid. He was like sort of baffled by the charifut of Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld, and in his confusion he started to cry. So anyway, afterwards, what happened was that, Rav Sonnenfeld, what he did was he comforted him. And Rav Shlomo Zalman says that years later, his father, Rav Chaim Leib, published a book called Chacham Leib. And in the book of Chacham Leib, he got an approbation, he got a haskama from the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim at the time, of Chaim Sonnenfeld. And in the approbation on his father's book, he said, and also there's a couple of sharp things that his son has said or has quoted. And Rav Shlomo Zalman couldn't understand. Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld is giving a haskama to his father's book. What is he now bringing in, like a comment or two that the son, has made? So actually, Rav Shlomo Zalman said that one of the Abay Beitin of the Eda Charedit, his name is Rav David Jungreis. So Rav David Jungreis, who was there, he was at the time that Rav Chaim Sonnenfeld was penning the letter of Haskama to the book of Chacham Leib, and he said to him that part of the reason that he's writing that is sort of to make up and to console the young Rab Shlomo Zalman Auerbach for the tears that he caused him when he was a little young boy. So Rab Shlomo Zalman is like an amazing. This is not only from his own experience, but from the way that Rab Chaim Sonnenfeld felt, like, because he caused a little child some tears by asking him a question which is like in a joke. He learned from that how much a person has to be so careful for his the emotions and the feelings of a young child. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman was a Shalmi. He learned in the classical the great yeshivas of Yerushalayim at that time, which was like Eitz Chaim. Eitz Chaim was headed by the famous Rabbi Zalman, and Rabbi Zalman gave him a svicha. What was a svicha? He said, "You now can posek halachot." Just like that, what was a svicha? But what caused Rav Shlomo Zalman to burst onto the scenes he wrote two books. One book when he was 23 years old, like sort of explanations of the Shev Shmaitata, but the major work which caused him to like explode on the scene, so to speak, was his book called Morei Ha'esh. It was published in 1935. He was all of 25 years old, and he dealt with the inyan of electricity. Because you must remember that in those days, the whole inyan of electricity, how do we actually relate to it in halacha, various types of electricity, some are asur d'oraita, some asur d'rabanan, etc. How do we define actually electricity? That was something which was like a new field. It was a lot of confusion. And so this is what the book that he wrote, Ma'orei Esh. It's got to do with our Parsha, in Parshat Truma, that Hashem says when building the Mishkan, so Hashem said, Al tavaru esh b'chol moshvotechem, that you're not allowed to tavaru esh, you're not allowed to have fire light fire in your habitats. So to get back to the point, so he wrote this incredible book on electricity. He had a couple of haskamot of the greats of the generation. Raphael, who was the rabbi in Chutz La'aretz, in Vilna at the time, the last Rav of Vilna, the great Raphael, and he also got a haskama from Rav Kook, which, by the way, when they wanted to reprint the book, and because of political considerations, so someone wanted him to print the book a couple of years back, but for political reasons to not mention or not print the approbation of Rav Kook. So he said, listen, if you don't put Rav Kook's approbation there first, number one, and you don't put it first, I'm not giving you permission to reprint and to this work of mine. So it's interesting that when he did print Rav Kook's Haskama, Rav Kook wrote to him a whole long letter, and one of the called him all sorts of titles. One of the titles that he gave him was like he's a young goat, but he already has got horns. In other words, that he's like beyond his age in Chokhmah. That title, that he's Ayal Bal Kanayim, those three words, Ayal, like a young ram, Bal Kanayim, but he already has got horns. So when that part he deleted, he didn't put it into Haskama, because that was his unbelievable. Everyone says that his anava was incredible. So Rav Shlomo Zalman, this was a forerunner of that Rav Shlomo Zalman dealt with all the new problems that was in Eretz Yisrael, the founding of the Medina. I mean, there were others did. We once spoke about Rav Oldenburg, but I mean, the person who was really like head and shoulders over everybody, and he is involved in all aspects of the new state, was the technical and technological side was Shlomo Zalman. What was amazing is that, for example, there was a lot of books that were published about the laws and guides for soldiers, for the Dati soldier, for the Ben Torah soldier in Eretz Yisrael. And the people who wrote it, most of their psakim were based on psakim of Rav Shlomo Zalman, where amazingly, in many of the things, he's much more lenient than actually the Rabbanut Rashit of the Tzava. In other words, he was more lenient and more understanding a soldier's position in the army than the actual army rabbinate, the army rabbinate itself. We all know that it's not only his Sfarim which were great, but the Sfarim that, because of his influence of his Talmidim, they also became the sort of book for modern people. I'm referring to, for example, Shmirat Shabbat Kelchata. Everybody knows that book that was written by his Talmid Rav Neuwirth. Almost every page of that book is I heard from Rav Shlomo Zalman others. I heard from Rav Shlomo Zalman. So, in fact, the whole way in which we keep Shabbat, based on also the new problems, were all based on the Inyanim teachings of Rav Shlomo Zalman. And we also know his works on Shmita, as well as his work in the medical fields as well. That in the Knesset, for example, they adopted a lot of his Piskei Halacha as far as what ethically we can do at a time of a person's, like just before a person passes on, and all sorts of Shailot, L'gabei, Nituchei Meitim, etc. So a lot of those Piskei Halacha are based on the Piskei Halacha of Rav Shlomo Zalman. So Rav Shlomo Zalman also was very, very lucky. He was a person who was mamash no frills attached. There was no, he didn't have a secretary. He didn't have titles. He was a Rosh Hashiva of Kol Torah in Beit Pagan, but he lived in Sharei Chesed. But his simplicity was amazing. So I can just tell you, not to get the idea that I was in any way a Talmid of his. No, unfortunately not. But what I can say is that when I was learning for a while in the Mir Yeshiva, so my late father, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was very sick. He had cancer, and I didn't know exactly what to do. Should I leave the yeshiva now, go back to South Africa? So people in Mir just told me, you know what, just go to Beit Pagan. He finishes shiur at such and such a time in Kol Torah, and go and speak to him. And that's exactly what I did. I waited for him outside his door. He finished the shiur, and afterwards we went to Mincha or whatever. I said, can I just speak to the Rab, the Rosh Hashiva? Yeah. And I just told him, should I go back to South Africa? And that's it. And he spoke to me for 5 minutes, and that was it. So, but I'm saying I didn't have to knock on the door. I didn't have to make an appointment. I just came up there. I came there, and that's how he was with everybody. That's absolutely pashtut, and because of that, also he shunned politics. No amount of pressure could be borne on him in order that he should come out with a public statement, vote for this Haredi party or for that Dati party. He was like an absolute, like an iron man that you could not influence him at all. He had his shitot, and that's it. That's how he was. The most amazing and incredible thing is that when he passed away in 1995, so first of all, there was never been at that time such a funeral. There was about 300,000 people at that funeral, but it wasn't only the amount of people. I mean, now you have others because there's much more like media attention, there's much more like politics, etc. But I mean, at that time, it wasn't such a lot. It was like the people, just the news channels couldn't get over this massive funeral. People just came out, all 300,000. But the other amazing thing was the cross-section of the people in the funeral. You could see Haredim, Kippot Shugot, you could get Sfardim, Ashkenazim. That was the most amazing thing, because that's exactly the person that he was. I just wanted to end over here with one thing that two things about. First of all, his simplicity. You know, he was a person who he had a shita, for example, when it came to the brachot of chocolate. Well, because it comes from cocoa, maybe you should make a borei pri'ach, but he didn't. When he paskened to other people, he knew that he had something very unique way of looking at those hilchot brachot for himself. When he spoke to other people, he spoke to them about making a shakol niyah bidvaro. It's now, we're just before Pesach, and I wanted to share you one of his very interesting halachot. He, in a shiur, he asked that on Erev Pesach, we've got what is called the fast of the firstborn, and he asked many questions on this minhag. And one of the questions that he asked, well, at the time of Yetziat Mitzrayim, all firstborns were killed, not only firstborn males, but for firstborn females as well. So how did it come that only the Tanit Bechorot that we have on Erev Pesach applies only to males? Why don't in the Shulchan Aruch Bemet it addresses this question? It doesn't go into it. It just says that the fast is only on the men and not on the women. And he's trying to understand like why. And after all, also it's like sort of almost Erev Yom Tov. So why is it that we've got a Tanit Bechorot? Okay, what we do is we exchange it for a Masechet, for Siyum b'Masechet, but there are a lot of questions besides those. And Rav Auerbach has got, Rav Shlomo Zalman has got the following very interesting, very novel way of explanation. He says like this: can you imagine that till Matan Torah, till the Chet HaEgel, there was who did all the korbanot, who did all the service in the there wasn't a Beit, there wasn't a Mishkan yet, but there was certain korbanot that had to be brought, and they were brought on, in fact, at the time of Matan Torah. So who did that? Who did it was the Bechorim, the people were the firstborns. And after the Chet HaEgel, that privilege was taken away from them because they were involved in the Chet HaEgel, and the only ones who not were Shevet Levi, and therefore it was transferred to Shevet Levi. So Rav Shlomo Zalman says, can you imagine there's one day in the year in which there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of korbanot which are brought. And what is that day? Erev Pesach. On Erev Pesach, right, the whole of Am Yisrael has to bring a korban and to eat over there from the korban Pesach. So can you imagine now, with all this shechita going along, can you imagine now how the terrible pain that the Bechorim, the male Bechorim, who know that we should be doing this job, and now they see that other people are doing the job. So now, as an expression of their being upset, their mourning, that they lost out on this, and to remember the Chet HaEgel, so that's why they did a fast, a fast on their participating in Chet HaEgel, which caused them now that on Erev Pesach, when there's so much work to be done, they forfeited it. So that's why it's the men and only not the woman. Just in parenthesis, his Talmud, one of his great Talmidim, Rav Nebenzahl, the famous Rabbi Nebenzahl, who's the Rosh Yeshiva of HaKotel, one of the Rosh Yeshivot HaKotel, and the Rav of the Rova, the old city. So he actually asked on Shlomo Zalman, he had a question. He just said, well, if that's the case, then the Bechorim, who are Kohanim, they shouldn't have to fast. He said that was a little bit difficult. He didn't answer that. He just had that here. So, this was the great Rav Shlomo Zalman, who was who had such a simplicity, who had such a simcha. You always see him in the pictures. He's always got like a smile on his face. There's so many stories that I can go on with, but I see that the time is close to 20 minutes. So I'll leave you with this, and maybe on Shabbat, when I speak on Friday night, I'll say things in Hebrew, but Yizichur Baruch. So Chodesh Tov to Kulam. I'm going to take sort of more or less a break from now till after Pesach on these recordings, unless it's for someone who is sponsoring. So Kol Tov to everybody. Shabbat Shalom.